Yep.
But does a recession, does that equal like a housing crisis? Do they go hand in hand or not?
So that's really interesting. And a lot of people have it in their minds. We technically had a recession in 2020 because of COVID, but we pulled out of it and almost overcompensated for it. But
Brodeen, my friend, how are you doing today, man?
hey, I'm good. How are you?
How about if I turn your mic up?
That's better.
That might be a little better. Now at least I can hear you.
Yeah. I'm good.
What's new?
How about yourself?
Hanging in there, man. It's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So we did our Duluth trip over Memorial Day weekend.
How did that go?
That was awesome.
Yeah. I like Duluth.
Me too.
It's a great place. Was it chilly there?
It was a little cold.
Yeah, because you get that wind off the lake there, and it it could be 80 here, and it's probably 70 there.
Yeah.
But you get over that real quick.
Yeah, there was a couple. We had one really nice day. We went up to the North Shore, went up to the Temperance River State Park.
Sure.
Man, that was nice. I've gone to a lot of the state parks that are up there, and that one was a really cool one.
This weekend on Saturday in Minnesota, you could stay at any state park for free.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Should have went this weekend.
Yeah, I know. Right? We stayed in Duluth, so we stayed like downtown Duluth. But
yeah, it's fun.
We spent a whole day up there hiking, and so the Temperance River, it's like this river that runs in this really deep crevice between these two rocks. So it's just like a thundering, and I don't know if it's because they got so much rain and snow recently, but man, it's just a ton of water.
A lot of water. It's so beautiful up there.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, that is like going to a different planet.
Yeah. It reminds me of like the Pacific Northwest kind of.
Yeah, it does. It does. Very similar. You think we should talk about realty stuff?
Yeah, we can.
I want to talk about recession because that's a big word now in most people's vocabulary.
Yep.
But does a recession, does that equal like a housing crisis? Do they go hand in hand or not?
So that's really interesting. And a lot of people have it in their minds. We technically had a recession in 2020 because of COVID, but we pulled out of it and almost overcompensated for it. But in the most recent, so the recession that in everybody's recent memory is the 2008 recession. And that is a recession when real estate values dropped by almost 20%. But then when you look at the other most recent recessions, there was a recession in 2001, and home prices actually gained value by 6.6%. There's a recession in 1991 where home values dipped really slightly. They dipped by 1.9%. So they almost stayed flat. In 1981, there was a recession where home values increased by 3.5%. And in 1980, there was a recession as well where home values where home values rose by 6.1%. So when you look throughout history, a recession does not always mean housing. It does not always mean a housing crisis. It does not always mean that homes are going to drop in value. The 2008 recession was caused by the housing market. The 2008 housing market, 2007, 2008, that whole period leading up to there was a much different situation than we're in right now. Right now, home buyers that have bought homes over the past 10 years are more qualified than ever. There was close to $350 billion in mortgage volume where the borrowers this is from 2003 to 2007, on average there was close to $350 billion in mortgages with credit scores below 620. So a lot of kind of not as qualified, not as reliable borrowers. From 2008 through now, it's been under $100 billion in mortgage volume where people have under a 620 credit score. And what's interesting is in the first quarter of 2022, the median credit score for all new mortgages was 776.
That's the medium score.
The median. Yes.
Oh, the median. Okay.
Yep, the median score was 776. So that means the majority of borrowers right now and over these past 10 years are more qualified than ever. Homeowners have more equity than ever, which in 2008, homeowners had very little equity. They were buying homes at 100% financing, more than 100% loan to value in some cases, stated income loans, so they couldn't afford the payments and they had no equity to fall back on if they needed to sell, which caused the foreclosure crisis. Right now, so what the one of the big questions is you've got very low supply and you've got very high demand in the housing market. First, we can talk about the demand in the housing market. the largest age group by, the largest age group demographic by population is the millennial age group. And that's basically anybody from age 26 to age 41. So people in the millennial home group, you've got the millennial home group on the younger end. They're entering the housing market. They're looking to buy their first home. And this is such a huge portion of the population that's entering the housing market that creates a ton of demand, and there's not enough supply to keep up with it. Supply is at record lows, and this isn't just in Grand Forks. This is across the country. You're seeing some markets that inflated really fast where their supply is starting to catch up to their demand. That's not the case here. Demand is even lower than it was last spring supply is even lower than it was last spring. There's less than 130 homes on the market in Grand Forks. So even if high interest rates are designed to try to slow down inflation, slow down the economy, cool it off.
Yep.
Even if high interest rates decrease buyer demand somewhat or price some people out of the market, you would need, in order for the housing market to crash, you would need everybody to want to try to sell at once. That's how something crashes. And there's another thing that's important to look at called the lock-in effect. That's where, when you look at what the average mortgage interest rate that the average homeowner has right now, it's so much lower than what they'd be able to get if they sold and bought a new home right now. That's even more incentive for them not to put their home on the market and not to move. Some people move because life circumstances have to move, but for people, when it's a choice, it's harder for them to make that choice and decide to pull the trigger on a move when they'd be going from a 3-point something interest rate up to a 5-point something interest rate.
Right.
So that's something that's also keeping supply very, very low. And when supply is low, prices will continue to rise. But if demand gets cut back a little bit, you're not going to see the really rapid increase in home values like we have over the past 2 years. But for a housing crash to happen, the housing market would have to do a total 180, which is really unlikely.
Okay, now you were talking about 2008.
Yeah.
All these foreclosures and stuff. And I don't really know how this works, but were there people getting mortgages that probably shouldn't have been able to get them?
There was,
and I hate to say this, but can lenders take advantage of something like that? And I would imagine that's against their code of ethics or whatever. But hey, let's give this guy a mortgage because I know he's not going to be able to come through with it, and we'll end up with a cheap house.
Yeah. So I think back in those days, and that was before my time in the real estate industry, but I think back in those days there were lenders who did things right and who were good, and there were lenders who were kind of greedy, and they're not doing it because they think that the buyer is going to foreclose.
Right.
But maybe there were some people who saw the opportunity to make a lot of money in origination fees, getting as many mortgages done as possible to borrowers who, maybe weren't qualified to be able to buy that type of house. With the mortgage, the requirements to be able to get a mortgage have gotten so much stricter. Back then, you'd have people who probably shouldn't even be buying one house being able to buy 2, 3, 4 houses. Now they look at your debt to income ratio, they look at your credit score, they look at, are you actually going to be able to comfortably afford this house? And if not, people aren't able to get the loan, or if they don't have good credit score, that they don't have enough money to put down. All those things factor in. So if you're not in a sound financial position where you should be, buying a home, you probably aren't going to be able to qualify. Or if you are, you're not able to qualify for a very nice home, and then maybe you just continue renting until you get your situation figured out.
You had mentioned when we talk about low inventory, how people who might be locked into a nice low interest rate, why would they want to sell and then buy and end up paying, maybe double the interest rate they're paying now? But what about like people whose mortgages are paid off? Maybe want to downsize. Do you think a lot of the low inventory has to do with the fact that, well, we don't dare sell because we can't find a place to buy?
Yeah, that has something to do with it too. That's not the majority of the situation. It's not the
many
majority
situations,
of the homeowners,
sure,
but there are some people in that situation. It's just inventory is less than half of what it was in 2019, and last year, more homes sold. It was a record year for the number of homes sold. This year, I'm assuming that'll be dialed back a little bit.
Okay.
So far, when we compare year to date, fewer homes have sold this year compared to last year. but the inventory is still lower. So, in order for them to it would take years for them to even build enough homes to catch up to the demand that's out there right now.
Because they're still building.
Yeah, they're still building. It's just it's the millennial home buyers that are really they're entering the market and they are looking to buy either their first home, maybe they're looking to buy a move-up home, but that population's so large that it's causing high demand for sure.
So with the low inventory, does that make your job harder or easier?
When I work for sellers, it makes it easier.
Oh, yeah.
And I get to, set records and get sellers a ton of money. When I'm working with buyers, like just yesterday, lost out on a bidding war. There were 7 offers.
Oh, boy.
And the winner ended up being cash and way over full price.
Oh, man.
So
how do you beat that?
Yeah, and it's not like that on every house, but on the most attractive houses, especially in the median sale price range and below, it is so competitive. And that's a little unusual. You don't see that many cash buyers out there, but it's
and I maybe have told you this before. My son and daughter-in-law, when they bought their new house a little over a year or so ago, that's how it was. He had like 7 showings for their house. They had already put money down on a new house without even seeing it, the pictures, because it's the bidding war. So they had like 8 showings. The first one showed up and said, "I'll take it. I'll give you what you want." The second person showed up and said, "I'll give you whatever $1,000 more." And within 5 minutes, another one showed up and said, I'll give you way more than that and I'll pay cash."
Oh, yeah.
And it was done deal.
Yep.
I mean, just like that. I'm kind of a realtor's dream, maybe.
Yep. And it's still, in order to get that type of outcome, you still need to do everything right. So you need to price the home properly, or else it's still not going to get the attention. It's still possible for even a nice home to stay on the market if you miss the mark on your price. Your advertising needs to show off all the aspects of the home, especially the selling points. The photos have to be great. The home has to be staged, cleaned, and prepped for sale properly, or else you're going to be leaving money on the table. If you do all those things right, if the advertising's right, the home preparation, staging is right, and the price is right, you can expect to have a really, really good outcome in this market. It's still going to take some work, If you decide to skimp on any one of those 3 things, preparation, the marketing, or the price, you're not going to get as good of an outcome as you could, but you should still be able to sell in this market.
Right. Is it this way everywhere, even like small town America? Because we're seeing more and more people move to small towns that are close to, like Grand Forks. We're going to, throw out Warren, Thompson, towns like that. Is it the same everywhere with the low inventory?
No. So what I find with the small towns, and I work primarily in Grand Forks, but if it's a close friend or a really close friend's referral or something like that, I'll occasionally work those small towns. There's more people moving out of those towns into Grand Forks than there are people moving from Grand Forks into those small towns.
I think the younger people are moving here, the older people are moving there.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. That's probably, I'd say that's a good estimate of what's going on. So those markets definitely aren't as hot. You don't see the type of appreciation in those small markets. I mean, Thompson's an exception because it's so close to town.
Yeah.
But the other small towns, there just isn't as much demand for those small towns to start with. So it's a slower selling process there.
All right. How does somebody get a hold of realty expert Mr. John Brodeen?
So follow me on Instagram. I post content almost daily, tons of short videos that are really informative to home buyers and sellers, or just anybody looking to stay on top of the real estate market. Subscribe to me on YouTube if you're ready to become a client and you want to reach out. My number is 701-213-5428. You can call or text me on that number.
Hey, I tell you what, enjoy your day today. It's a beautiful one out there. Hopefully you don't have too much office work to do. And we'll see you Friday.
That sounds good. Yep.
All righty. There you go. That's your realty expert, John Brodeen. And for this Wednesday, that's your Berkshire Hathaway bi-weekly podcast.